Hey everyone, Magic Sword here with what is hopefully a new series of sort of in-depth deck analysis, doing the stats side of things, because I tried to do that on stream and play the game at the same time, and that doesn't work out so well. So we're going to start today with the deck I've been playing a lot, and the deck I've been playing the most, I'd say, Stealth Rogue. Now, we're going to talk about a few variants, but thankfully, as you can see here, there are 14 cards that are considered core, according to HSReplay. And, well, you only have 30 cards in a deck. All of these are duplicates. So that means that there are basically only 2 slots, realistically, I'd say 4, that are flexible within this particular archetype. So that means that we have this is a good entry level thing, right? Like, I don't have to talk about that much difference. So, yeah, I've seen basically all of these in every single version, every single popular, powerful version lately. Sometimes you'll see Wolf Riders instead of deckhands. That's bad. Don't do that. Sometimes you'll see. I think that's actually the only one in the core. So, really, what we're going to be talking about today is Lillian, Plague of Madness, Deadly Poison. How do you know what to pick? What do you do? So let's actually start with the most popular version of this deck, which is, of course, not the best because people kind of like pick an archetype or pick a build and stick with it for way too long and don't follow up on like how to optimize it or anything. So this version is by far, actually, it's about tied with the next best version, which is the one I run. Or the next most popular, rather. So, big things to point out here are Akama and Wolf Rider. These 3 cards are outclassed by other cards basically in every regard, right? Because there are cards that function similarly that just do the job better. So just real quick, if you're currently playing this version, upgrade to the version I run, at least. I'm not saying mine is the best version. I'm not saying it's objectively perfectly amazing because I run Plague of Madness, and frankly, I don't really like it that much. I think you could easily argue for a Deadly Poison in that slot or something similar. So let's just having briefly touched on that, let's go to the version I would suggest, which is this right here. So big thing here is that instead of Akama, you run Lillian. Just does pretty much everything Akama does, but better. Akama Prime isn't very good for this deck. It's kind of expensive, and Permanent Stealth is nice, I guess, for proccing your Greyheart Sages and your Ash Tongue Slayers, but you're in top deck mode at this point. Hopefully you kept your Greyheart Sages early and you got them out of the way, or you're similar with your Ash Tongue Slayer, right? So, ideally, and also you don't want to be shuffling things into your deck. You kind of want that consistency of like, oh, I can pull my Eviscerate, I can pull my Cold Bloods, especially with Secret Passage. Akama is very expensive for what this deck tends to do with its miracle turns. Again, though, Plague of Madness is kind of questionable. So we'll get into why it's questionable when we look at the Mulligan guide. So let's sort first by Mulligan win rate. You can see that if you have Greyheart Sage is the highest Mulligan win rate alongside Sneaky Delinquent and Spy Mistress. Let's think about this logically. Spy Mistress is your best turn 1, almost objectively. Okay. Sneaky Delinquent, very strong in general. It's good resource generation, right? So if it gets cleared, you still have resources left in your hand, and they both synergize with Greyheart Sage on 3. You basically always want to be able to play this on 3, right? You can see that this is kept about 80% of the time. These are kept almost 100% of the time. Greyheart, probably, you can say that 20% is when people don't have a guaranteed stealth minion before then. I'd agree with that assessment. Generally, you want to get rid of if you have like these 2, definitely keep Greyheart Sage. If you have this one, probably keep it. If you don't have anything, you're going to want to aggressively mulligan for a 1, if not a 2-drop, right? So Secret Passage, this is something I go back and forth on, keeping it in the opening. I can believe that having it as really good reload is important, but you can see here that it actually has a very low kept rate, meaning that similar to Greyheart Sage, you really only want to keep it if you have things in hand to play on turns 1, 2, and probably 3. So once you play out your hand, you can follow it up with Secret Passage on like 4 or 5 when you actually have the mana to utilize it properly. Ash Tongue, similarly, 45% of the time. Okay, cool. So you want to see that this is only kept when you have a 1-drop stealth minion, either Worgen or Spy Mistress. Worgen, again, has that positive mulligan win rate. In some builds, it might be slightly below. So positive and negative here defined are below or above what the average expected win rate of the deck is overall. So when you have this in your mulligan, yeah, it's weaker than Spy Mistress, but it's still a good turn one, right? Infiltrator Lillian is so strong that in the 22% of cases where she's kept, which again, I'm assuming is when you have a 1-2-3 curve, and you're going, so presumably you're going second, which would explain the low kept rate of 22%, despite the apparently high win rate, right? I would expect her to do pretty well. So Scorpid, again, people probably only keep it on 4 if they can curve into it. And now when you get into these win rates, this is kind of like, oh, you didn't. When you get into these win rates, it's kind of like, okay, you do not want to keep this at all. Cold Blood is useless without minions in play. Sinister Strike is not a good thing to just throw out, right? Sap, similarly, very low tempo. It doesn't actually put anything on your board. Eviscerate, you want that as a finisher. You don't want it in your opening. Hooked Scimitar, very hard to activate early. Backstab is interesting. That's an interesting case to me because 42% of people seem to keep it. They think it's a good idea. But it actually has a 53.5% kept on mulligan win rate. So what does that mean? It means that you're probably keeping it to try to counteract an unfavorable matchup, and that you are going to you're just kind of destined to lose anyway, and it just kind of happens to get lumped in there. Alternatively, people keep it when they really shouldn't. They think it's better than it is, because you can burn through your hand very quickly with this deck, right? So if you had that backstab but not a secret passage, well, not so good. Also, backstab is an amazing secret passage card, so that means that if you have it in hand, you didn't draw it off secret passage, right? So things to consider there. I think the root of this, though, is that people are keeping it when they shouldn't be. So the next time you keep a backstab or you have it in your opening mulligan, think about whether you really need it in this matchup, right? Is it a demon hunter? Well, it could be control, right? But also probably keep it. Is it a mirror? Probably keep it. Is it basically any other matchup? Maybe not. Definitely don't keep it against things like Druid and Mage. Definitely don't keep it against Priest, right? Even if you think, oh, I really need to kill that Sethic Veil Weaver, you have other probably better ways to do it, ways that are more good or that are better for your tempo, right? And Plague of Madness, we'll handle all of the things about Plague of Madness later because there's a lot I want to unpack with that. So next we have the drawn win rate of all these cards. Yeah, win rate if at some point in the game you draw the card. You can, if you go on HSReplay, you can see how these are defined. Average win rate of games when the card ended up in the opening hand. Average win rate of games where the card was drawn at any point or ended up in the opening hand, right? So that includes mulligan win rate. So, let's sort by drawn win rate. Secret passage is at the top because now that you're including when you get it later in the game, yeah, you better believe it's good. Greyheart Sage, similarly. Spy Mistress, still good. Delinquent, still good. These are all just amazing cards. I don't think that shocks anyone. Win rate on draw for these cards, yeah, this is pretty high. Eviscerate's a finisher. Worgen is nice to get, especially in conjunction with Greyheart Sage and your other stealth synergies. You probably wouldn't have, if you had a Spy Mistress, you might not have kept Worgen, for example, right? Deckhand, also part of your finishers, particularly with Cold Blood. Lillian, yeah, she gets, is there a percent? I didn't think there was a percentage drawn. Okay. So, all these last few ones, you'd see that they're kind of all hovering around the same. They're all above 56%. There's kind of a steep drop off here. 59.8, 58.8, 58, 57.8. These are kind of lumped together. Then 56.7, another whole percentage drop off. And then it's kind of a slow decline down to Scorpid. And then last is Backstab, Cold Blood, Sap. Again, these are pretty situational cards. Maybe it feels bad to run them, but they're pretty strong in those situations, so you should probably keep them in the deck, right? When you see that Cartoot Defender, sap it. When you see any taunt drop, really, sap it, right? Sap is such a staple, strong rogue card. You almost can't play without it, despite the fact that it consistently underperforms, right? It's one of the worst in Mulligan, bottom 3 Mulligan, bottom 3 drawn. Probably pretty low play, yeah, worst played win rate by a wide margin as well. And that stems from the fact that if you're playing sap, you're playing from behind, and you're probably going to lose anyway, right? And we'll talk about that in a bit as well. So, backstab similarly, you're probably playing from behind, and you just use a resource. That card could have been something else, and it wasn't. It's kind of what it comes down to. Cold Blood, drawn win rate's pretty bad. A lot of the times it's a dead card. Same with backstab, same with sap. A lot of the time it's just kind of cluttering your hand, and when it does get played, it's not very high tempo. But let's look at played win rate. So Cold Blood is the top. Your win rate when you play Cold Blood is super high. You know why? Because you play that as a finisher. Played win rate with Greyheart Sage. Yeah, it's just a strong card, okay? Ash Tongue Slayer, combination strong card and finisher. Eviscerate, finisher. Sinister Strike, finisher. You're using these to finish off your opponent. That's why the win rate is so high. Because when you play it, you're playing from ahead, right? It's sort of the reverse case of what we just talked about with sap, right? So, and then back to just these are strong cards. Hook Scimitar is sort of just it's a good card, but also in this case it's a finisher, right? Then Lillian, yeah, she's a 4-drop. She's one of 3 4-drops in the deck. She's a little weak in that regard. Deckhand, yeah. Now Secret Passage being this low on played win rate might surprise you, but think about this. If you are using Secret Passage, it means you've run out of resources and you're desperate. So this is your last ditch effort. This is the last card you play before you concede, you know? So a lot of the time, if you are in a position where you absolutely have to use Secret Passage, you're well behind and you're digging for lethal, you're on death's door, and you're just trying to make sure your opponent gets there first, right? And Plague of Madness has kind of been in the middle of this the whole time. We're gonna touch on that, I swear. Scorpid, yeah, it makes sense. You know, if you're like on turn 4 and you're playing your Scorpid, that means that they had a body on turn 4 that you were trying to deal with. Unless you're using that Scorpid as a finisher, and it's not looking good for you. Worgen, I mean, it's a 1-2. It's a 2-1 for 1. You have a 3-1 for 1 that's similarly, right? Pretty strong. So, and again, backstab and sap, same reason. If you are using these, you're playing from behind, and therefore you are more likely to lose. But you do, I think, unless somebody can think of something better to put in that slot, need them in the deck. Now then, let's finally address Plague of Madness. So, you can see that it has a pretty sad win rate in each category. We would largely consider this to be underperforming, right? I think that you could pretty easily fit a Deadly Poison in that slot instead, and it would be good. I prefer Plague of Madness because it makes me feel fancy, and I kind of just like the vibe of it. That is such a bad justification for running a card, but I'm going to be honest, that's kind of what it is. I like it. I like being able to replace Bomb Warrior's weapon. I like being able to make people like think about something weird. Like the big issue is that you're giving your opponent a weapon, and this is awful in matchups where your opponent normally would not be able to have a weapon because you're just giving them an extra attack to clear your minions with. That's the biggest case against it. And I think I'm going to try running a Deadly Poison there instead in it's starting tomorrow. So, or today, I suppose, is the day it'll go up. So, we'll see. Okay, and that about wraps everything up. I would like to say that this will probably go a little bit smoother in future videos. I'll probably do one on Pain Lock, because that's another one I have quite a bit of experience with. If there are any things that you would like me to go over that I didn't in this video, make sure you comment below. If you want to see this deck in action, you can go ahead and check my stream or check any of the clips that I've posted to YouTube. Both are fantastic choices for learning this deck. You can just ask HSReplay. They keep redirecting people to my stream. I had an amazing win streak with this deck recently. Got to triple digit legend with it after like 10, 12 wins in a row. It was ridiculous. Anyway, go ahead and check out my stream. Check out those videos. And I will see you guys next time.